Welcome everyone to Gamer Meld. Today I've got a few interesting stories, from Intel's Discrete GPUs being found, some craziness from Asus, and a 12-core CPU for $260. But first, you only have a few days to sign up for the Gamer Meld Rewards program. For those who don't know what that is, every 3 months of successful patronage, $5 patrons, the Meld Ambassador, will get a sweet gift. This month, I'm actually sending out a bunch of Athlon 64X2s, and you can actually see it comes with some thermal paste, just in case you want to actually use it. They are supposed to work, but of course, this is more for like a collector's item, and really just a thank you for my patrons. Okay, it's news time, and first up for today, a new Intel GPU was spotted in an Intel test driver and shared on Anitech's forums. What's funny is that the release was apparently a mistake by Intel because they pretty quickly took it down, and here's why. In the update, you can actually see that Intel shared 4 new GPUs that aren't on the market right now. Now, we don't know definitively what these are and what everything means, but we do have some pretty good guesses. For one, there's a bit of a hint up here in some other GPUs that were found, but they're not as interesting because they're actually integrated GPUs. Either way, you can see right here RKL. This is significant because if we actually go to a recently leaked roadmap, you can see where it says Rocket Lake U. That right there is what it's referring to, which is actually going to be AMD's architecture after Comet Lake. Now, Rocket Lake U, you can see, is 14 nanometers plus and 10 nanometers graphics. So this should tell us that this is likely 10 nanometer GPUs. Now, we don't know for sure because these are actually, let me actually get back, these are referring to discrete graphics cards. And the reason we think that is this right here, DG, for discrete graphics. Now, we don't know for sure, but we see it once again over here and once again up here. So we have DG1 and DG2. It also mentions HP and LP. So this is likely low power, which explains it just being a 1, and then HP likely being high power for DG2. Another thing that kind of gives away that it is a discrete graphics card, or that these are discrete graphics cards, are the numbers right here. Usually in Intel's code names, a lot of times at the end, when we're talking about graphics cards at least, it will say the number of cores it has, and pretty much no iGPU is going to have 512 or even 256. I could potentially see 128, but not the other two. Now, these numbers can't really tell us too much about performance, and the reason why is because, for one, you absolutely, just like you can't compare AMD to NVIDIA's CUDA cores to AMD's cores, is because it's a completely different design, it's a completely different architecture. You actually can't even compare actual computational power between the two. You can compare it within each other's architecture, so you can compare AMD's teraflops to AMD's teraflops. For example, specifically in games, if you look at NVIDIA, what it's competing with AMD, and you look at both of their teraflops, AMD always has way more, and that's actually why they do really well in computational workloads, but at the same time, it just does not tell you very much for gaming. With that said, like I said, you can compare it within the same company, or should I say within the same architecture. And one kind of cool thing, but this really doesn't tell us too much, this is a lot of guessing, but it's interesting to discuss. You can see over here that someone actually kind of did the math, and it sounds about right. If you look at the HD 630s, 24 EUs, and then you add them together as if they had 512, that puts it at about 9.4 teraflops of FP32 compute, which is slightly around the RTX 2080s. And then some other people actually mentioned that it should be clocked much higher than that, which is true, because this is a discrete GPU versus an iGPU, so if it's clocked higher, that should put it more than likely around the 2080 Ti's. But of course, that part is just for fun. What's really interesting here is just the fact that they're out in the wild. Intel is obviously working really hard on these. They're supposed to be launching in 2020 from what we've seen so far, and hopefully they're going to be on 10 nanometers. Next up for today, we have a pretty wild story, and the gist of it is basically that Asus released some pretty kind of mean marketing slides for their X570 motherboards against MSI and Gigabyte. This made MSI and Gigabyte go to AMD, say, hey, this isn't cool. AMD apparently went to Asus and suggested that the slides disappear, and they did, but not before we got a hold of them. As far as what I think, I will say that I do believe it's pretty lowbrow, but at the same time, Samsung and Apple have gone back and forth with some pretty mean stuff, specifically Samsung with some of their videos, and a lot of people tend to like them. But once again, it is pretty lowbrow, and really the thing that aggravates me is the fact that I honestly don't think it's true. So I'm going to go over them, but at the same time, what's interesting is that this actually gives us a hint at what we can expect from AMD's upcoming 16-core 3950X. Either way, let's go over them. First up, As you can see, it's poorly edited for one, but at the same time, Asus is crowning itself. It's the best motherboard, and see, just a little bit ridiculous. And one thing I do find kind of funny is that we have Gigabyte right here, and yet they, they're trying to hide it, MSI X, but yet they show them on the board. So it's like, oh, well, we're not really, we're not necessarily naming them, even though there's only a few motherboard manufacturers, but then they leave the name on the motherboards. As far as what they're saying, they mostly reference power delivery, VRMs, MOSFETs, things like that. One thing that I do find kind of funny on this slide is that it actually references 6-layer PCB, but I'm almost positive BioStar also does a 6-layer. Now, don't quote me 100%, but it is pretty funny that they chose MSI and Gigabyte, even though, you could argue that it's because they're the biggest. But it's funny they mentioned that, yet Power Color, like I said, I do believe has a 6-layer PCB. Anyway, let's go over here. Okay. So this is where things kind of get interesting. If we look here, 16 core, this is obviously going to be the 3950X. This is the AM4 platform, so it has to be. We can see that they have 3.9 gigahertz compared to MSI's 3.2. What's interesting is that, for one, I almost guarantee that this is an all-core overclock, and potentially what we can expect, best case scenario, will likely be 3.9 gigahertz, although I will say I see it going a little bit higher than that. But of course, this is 16 cores, and to be honest, that is pretty impressive. Now, whenever we move, let's see, whenever we move here, you can see that they're talking a 700 megahertz difference. I honestly don't see that. Right now, from my testing, the B450 is actually able to get the same kind of overclock as my X570. Granted, that is a 12-core CPU, and to be honest, the 16-core will likely be a difference, but there's so much overhead in the X570, I do not see there being any kind of difference, and I'm not talking about an Asus X570, but I do not see any kind of difference between these boards, especially 700 megahertz. I'm sorry, I don't see it. Maybe it's right. Hey, Asus, if you want to send me a board, if you want me to try it out, send it over and I will. If it's true, hey, I'll say it. Once again though, 3.8, 3.9 gigahertz, this is really awesome. This is great performance, 16 core CPU if we are talking about an all-core overclock. But what's even more impressive is the fact that we can purchase a 12-core CPU for less than $300. And I'm not an affiliate or anything, so this isn't going to give me a kickback, but I just had to share this. It just goes to show how incredible AMD has affected the market, how incredibly. We're talking 2 years ago, a 12-core CPU, you couldn't get one for cheaper than like $1,000. And now you can get one for less than $300. That to me is just a testament to how groundbreaking, how incredible Ryzen really has been. We're talking $1,000 to less than $300 in 2 years. So anyway, just wanted to show you this. If you want a 12-core CPU, obviously there's a 3900X, but for $260, this is not a bad deal. So while that does it for today, let me know what you're most excited about for Intel's upcoming discrete GPUs down in the comments below. And if you liked the video, I know that I talk and ramble like crazy whenever I do these kind of talking head videos, but I was really excited to discuss this. Just wanted to get it out there for you as quickly as I could. Anyway, if you like it, please subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and as always, have a great day.